So, last year it wasn't so much of a thing, but then over the course of the whole year, the Korean community literally exploded on Steemit. I can't read and write Korean, unfortunately, so I'm missing out on many of those stories. I know there's one witness and whale, Clay Up. He couldn't be here, he's in San Francisco. He sponsored actually, I think, 6 or 7 people all the way from Korea to join in here in Lisbon. And Michael Lee, didn't you know? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Michael Lee, aka hansikhouse, will give a little introduction, or maybe a big introduction, on the Korean community on Steemit. Michael Lee.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me? No? Now? Yes? Yes? Okay. Well, thank you guys, Roland and the Steemit team, for making this obviously all possible for us to be here. Thank you guys for coming to the talk. Like Roland announced, for the past year, Steemit has seen the explosion of the Korean community, more shorthand known as #KR and various other hashtags. And it's been consistently one of the most rapidly adopted technologies in Korea, and the rate just keeps going up. So today I'm going to kind of go over my experiences with it, the kind of history of growth, what today's aspects of the dynamic Korean community is, and what the kind of roadmap looks going forward. So I put this, or my wife and I helped put this presentation together a couple days ago, and as soon as the new logo was announced, I was pretty bummed. I was like, okay, I still want to show it because I don't think I can Photoshop Korea into that shape. But then about an hour ago, my wife texted me this photo. So that also works nicely with the new logo. So I'll go over all these points, and if you've seen the title of the talk, it's I believe it's Restructuring the Social Fabric of Korea with STEEM. So not only am I going to talk about how KR as a community all over the world has affected Steemit, but also vice versa, right? How has this technology affected the cultural context of Koreans, of Korea, and so forth? So Roland also mentioned there's actually a pretty good contingency of KR members here today. There are 5 sitting in that row right there. And yeah, stand up, please stand up. Bow. Ramen Girl, some of you may know her. She's wearing the traditional Korean garb, so be sure to take advantage of selfies later on. Thank you for wearing that. All these guys know a lot more about certain parts of the Korean community and what they're doing, so please, continue the discussion afterwards with them. There is success trainer Roy Choi, who head up a lot of these social events. They're actually working on Steam Park Korea right now, which I'll talk about in a second. Many of you might know Ramen Girl. She does a lot of those food blogs, travel blogs, super fun. Ma and Luderum do a lot of the technical side of Korean growth, so ask them all those questions, don't ask me. But like Roland mentioned, we actually crowdsourced from within KR to bring all these guys out here. And that's just a taste of kind of the power that the community is putting behind Steemit and some of the effects that are happening. So I'll go back to last year. I actually joined as hansikhouse in late September, October. I was brought on, my partner with Sandbox and Hiderion Vornoise right there, and we'll be talking about Sandbox tomorrow. But when I joined with him, because we were really excited about potentially using Steemit for design, for interventions, sculptures, architecture, etc. And we created a joint account, Hiderion, for our design collective. And while I was at it, I thought, okay, well, I should make one for myself too. I can talk about certain things. My wife and I have a cultural development company, so I do a lot of work with UNESCO cities in Korea. I work a lot with Korean Americans. That's what I am. I'm born in the US, grew up there. And as I started to explore Steemit, I noticed a little hashtag KR there, right? And so I'd click on it every so often. It would kind of show up in the trending lists. Back then, it wasn't so trendy. And whenever I clicked on it, everything was in Korean, and my Korean's not that great. And on top of that, it was a lot of financial and technical data of last year. People were around last fall. A lot of Steemit was technical and blockchain, crypto-focused posts. So it didn't really entice me so much. And then every so often again, the KR tag would disappear. And so I was like, okay, I'll talk about Korean culture, but I'll do it in English. I was still kind of figuring things out. And kind of when massive adoption started to happen in, I would say, late winter, early spring, you started to notice the KR tag go up and up and up and up. And you can see from this graph that Koreans, again, were the fastest users. That tag was being used again and again and again. And actually, during that time, right before this happened, I started to notice a lot of English comments from Korean whales, Korean existing veterans, like Cleop, for example, like Sochul, like Woo, like Tubi. They made the effort to reach out to me to try to cultivate the Korean community. They knew that I was Korean American, so they would post in English. We want you to post in Korean. We want you to do this. We want you to do that. And that's when I kind of fell into the Korean community. I felt more responsible and thought, okay, I can try to help this grow. And my focus is much more on the foreign Korean population and more recently expats in Korea. But all of a sudden we saw this explosion. So if people were on Steemit back in the spring, late spring, we saw thousands of people coming on every week, right? And so the problem flipped. At the beginning it was, can we get more Koreans on there, right? And I always look at KR as a kind of microcosm and a swath of Steemit in general. The problems they were facing, Steemit would also be facing at that same time or eventually, and so forth. And so there were a lot of challenges with too many people, right? I think during the panel they talked about the firehose effect, right? We were seeing hundreds of posts per day, and they weren't organized, they weren't structured. Nobody knew what was happening, and the whales were kind of scrambling to figure out how to structure these posts so that a newbie coming on wouldn't post 5 times, make $0, and then leave. That was one of the biggest fears, retention rates. That's obviously an issue with Steemit as well, but this happened strangely in a very intense way with KR, and kind of unlike a lot of other posts, if there were too many KR posts, it would damage us internally because we couldn't mobilize properly. And so you can see this was back in July when a lot happened, 355 posts with KR per day? Yeah, per day. And again, it's consistently one of the top trending, most used regional and community-based hashtags. So very early on, we, as a community, had to figure out how to structure the community, how to best mobilize and give people responsibility and a reason to stay on Steemit. And so one of the early tactics that Cleop really spearheaded, and Cleop asked me to do this talk, by the way, which I'm very humbled and I feel honored to do, he started to play with delegation, right? And a lot of other whales followed suit, Light Hill, Old Stone, Abdular. And so the question was, rather than one whale having a lot of power and trying to figure out things by themselves, it would be much more effective if a lot of people had medium amounts of power. It would give them a sense of responsibility. That's what happened to me, and that's why I got more involved. And it would also allow us to multitask a lot. We could cultivate certain kinds of hashtags, we can cultivate certain kinds of communities. And as the population was exponentially growing, we knew that we had to focus on certain demographics or certain age groups, certain professions, certain topics to make sure everyone was properly nurtured on the platform. So we're still experimenting with this. They're always experimenting with how much delegation to give to who, for what reason, for what amounts of time, for what purpose in the end. And we see a lot more delegation happening today. But back then, the kind of experimentation was really successful. We started to see a huge increase in not only KR, but subtags as well, right? KR-newbie for new people, right? We would specifically kind of funnel new users into this tag, and then we'd be able to properly, onboard them, welcome them, embrace them, KR writing. And you'll see later on, I'll show a slide where there are dozens more now. Dozens more that are used on a daily basis. And now, for instance, I believe it was Old Stone who had a kind of application system. So someone would apply to get delegation power, whether it was 8,000 or 10,000 Steem power. And they would say why, right? They would say, okay, I'm a professional in science, and I want to cultivate KR-science. And this is my background, this is what I'm going to do. And then so if they met good, universal criteria for the community, they would receive that power, and then they could cultivate that tag on their own. And they were responsible. And so another challenge that came up immediately because there were so many users and because the tag went up really quickly in the trending list was tag abuse. And this is one of the more contentious aspects of community growth that we've had to tackle with, but there was so much abuse happening. And I know some of you guys probably are familiar with Steem cleaners, right? With plagiarism, identity theft. We were experiencing those same problems, but other specific ones as well that weren't falling under the purview of Steem cleaners. So we knew early on that we had to mobilize ourselves. One of the biggest one of the biggest issues was translation, right? People were seeing that Korean posts were trending, and they, I guess, assumed that if they just simply Google translated or whatever translated the post into Korean, they could just stick the hashtag on and someone would give them upvotes. The problem is, between English and Korean, and this is a very kind of PG example, there are many vulgar examples of when you translate it, the same, I don't know, you can see right here, come on instead of follow me, right? It's not communicated right? And a lot of times, simple English or whatever to Korean translations would often be cuss words or offensive terms, or just like make no sense, right? So it's not a problem, and this happens, I'm sure, with every hashtag, where people are kind of like, oh, should I tag it with KR or not, or can I kind of get into that tag? But with this, we were seeing a lot of abuse, just lots of translation, a lot of diluting of the tag. So it was so much work for an average minnow, dolphin, whale to navigate through all the posts. So this was becoming a problem. There were hundreds of these every day. And so another big challenge was plagiarism. Plagiarism is a lot harder to detect if it's Google translated plagiarism. So copying off Wikipedia, plugging into Google Translate, pasting that in, mixing some words around, it won't get caught by Steam cleaners or other bots on the platform. And the last one, this one is not communicated so much because it's much more internal, but abusive curators. Because early on, we did things like delegation power to certain curators, and very often that power would be abused. There would be circles, we often affectionately call it circle jerking, where you kind of just upvote friends, or you call yourself a curator and focus your attention on you, but you're not really curating. And the rest of Steemit says, oh, this is great, the curator is supporting KR or supporting whatever country, but that person wasn't actually representative. So there will be a lot of kind of internal battles to sort those things out. And we've had some kind of oustings of certain individuals who took too much power upon themselves. So like I said, we want to create not only versions of Steam cleaners and other services for the KR community, but also to tackle specifically things like Google Translate or things like that. So there's things like Cheer Up that helps kind of mitigate too much abuse. KR Guide Dog is a super fun one where they took pictures of dogs that were owned by Korean people on the site, and then it's a bot where if it's in like a Google Translated or you're just spamming the tag, it'll give a friendly comment, right? Not a kind of confrontational one, but say, woof woof, we've met X amount of times already, and please make sure you follow the guidelines and don't Google Translate or spam or whatever. So that was nice, because before that, we had to manually go in and be like, it seems like you're just translating, it seems like you're just copying and pasting or plagiarizing, and then that would create, obviously, pain points between us and the external community, or even within KR. Language barrier is a big thing. Sneak talked about the UN and making sure that English isn't just the go-to thing. So very early on, Luderum spearheaded this, steamkr.com. It's a Steemit interface, everything's in Korean. It'll keep the blog titles and content in English, but then all the functions, all the FAQ stuff, that would be in Korean. So this was obviously one thing that we wanted to do very quickly, and people spearheaded this approach. And just the growth, this was back in June to July, right? You see the kind of usage of SteamKR, which is much more than Steemit.com now. And I believe right now, monthly unique log or unique access to the site are about 30,000. And daily it averages about 1,500. So it's continuing to grow even when it seems like there's a lower rate of onboarding on Steemit in general right now. So this is the exciting part, the gains for me. I don't have a technical background, so I'm watching a lot of this and helping get involved with a lot of these things. But I really want to emphasize how Steemit is starting to affect Korean society. Korean society on the peninsula, Korean groups of people, and focusing on the gains of what people are actually doing with Steem, both in applications, in physical projects, activities, things like that. Like I mentioned before, that the hashtags have diversified immensely. We have things like KR Agora, where we focus on discussions, political discussions, economic discussions. KR Cats, that's a super popular one. People put up their cat stuff. So it's a great way to start to mobilize and organize all the different topics. We have Muck Steem, Ramen Girl knows that very well, kind of like mukbang where you're watching people cook and eat food, which is a big phenomenon in Korea. And there's so much stuff going on. KR Game, people are doing StarCraft tournaments online with KR members. So every day it's diversifying, and every day people are applying and trying to mobilize certain topics to build upon, which is great because that means anybody that comes on Steemit from the KR Korean side can immediately say, oh, how can I get involved? Oh, I really like food, so I'm going to join MuckSteam, or I really like discussing, so I'm going to join Agora. It gives people kind of a bounce back and a landing pad to be involved in Steemit as a whole. And in Korean society, e-commerce culture is very, very strong. People are ordering food and groceries and things and mattresses and whatever online all the time. This is just an example of one e-commerce site. So one big thing that has flourished, I think Woo, one of the older members, sent a pair of slippers to Ned. I don't remember exactly, but people make stuff and sell it to people through Steem, right? So obviously, a lot of these functionalities aren't baked in yet. Hopefully, they will be when the app comes out, the wallet app. But easily selling to people. Some people make their stuff and have cultivated this KR market online. I have a T-shirt that I'll wear tomorrow as well that I bought and was shipped to me from Korea that I bought with SBD. And then I'm an architect and background, so I love physical projects. I believe the Steam Park project, after Vornoy and I finished the Steam Park project in Brooklyn, Success Trainer and Roy Choi really wanted to do something in that vein in Korea. And so right now they've fundraised a good amount of money. People have donated their SPD and Steam, delegated power to, and you guys should all check this out on at Success Trainer and at Roy Choi. They're talking every day about the development of the park, everyone getting involved. And it's cool because even more diversified than the Steam Park project in Brooklyn, they're making the mural team or the prize team. And so they're starting to do physical murals and projects in Korean cities. Art Shop is one, at Art Shop. That's where a lot of the creative people in KR have gotten together, and they offer custom banners, thumbnails for people who want to buy it with SPD. That's like another organizational level on top of their personal ones. Someone I admire a great deal on KR is Chirina79, who does fundraising for orphanages. So about once a week, he'll do a post and he'll donate all of the SPD and Steam to a local orphanage that he works at. And so a lot of these things, they seem like unique projects or pockets of just moments for Steemit. But I have to emphasize, if anybody is familiar with Korean society, has visited Korea, knows a bit about the country, Korea, despite its kind of physical, technological development in the last few decades, it is still a very traditional hierarchical society. So when you look at it from the lens of diverse people meeting on the web and collaborating on a project, or diverse people mobilizing a nonprofit project and donating money, or people of different demographics, different age groups, different economic backgrounds, communicating, getting advice, even, I guess, getting entrepreneurial investment in terms of delegation and steam power, a lot of these things are either few and far between in Korea or just downright impossible in a country that is dominated by monopolies, that there's a super hierarchy between people who live in a certain region versus another region. And I don't want to downplay Korean culture too much, but from a critical view, I personally believe, and this is why I always practice my Korean and I try to be involved as much as I can, that Steemit itself, decentralized technology, is changing the way Koreans form relationships, Koreans form friendships, organizations. Even though Korea is technologically advanced, it's very lopsided. You have monopolies like Samsung, like LG, SJ Telecom, Korean Air, and you have almost virtually no entrepreneurship, both economic and nonprofit. So the fact that, a lot of speakers have talked about the entrepreneurial side of things. I think these are versions and the first steps of getting to that point. And after a number of these donations or a number of these projects, I could definitely see KR members, forming businesses around them. Young people starting to do things like work with government officials, which again is virtually impossible. Nobody ever donates to government projects. They're all infrastructural and bureaucratic. But with the Steam Park project, for example, they went with the pool of SPD and Steam that they fundraised, and they said, we're going to do something. right? You don't have to just give us permission. We're gonna do this mural. We're gonna do this project. And so I think for me, as an outsider, because I'm living in New York and I'm always kind of trying to be involved, those are huge moments, not just STEAM aside, but as human activity in Korea. The last thing is meetup groups. Roy Choi is the king of meetup groups. And I forgot to say, he made and fundraised for Steemit banners for everybody here. He has like 200 or 300. And so he's gonna hand them out to everybody. Yeah, I meant to talk about that at the beginning to get some hype. But these are banners. You can take a marker and write your name on them. I think we could do like a group photo later, maybe. But Roy Choi loves physically going and mobilizing certain groups of people, whether it's in general or there was recently a KR women's meetup. There was I believe a KR Ajima meetup, right, where retired housewives got together. And Roy Choi he physically goes to different cities in Korea, gets people together at cafes, gets them to make pictures like this. And I believe it was Dollar Vigilante who touched upon this, that, we have a lot of people online talking about blockchain, Bitcoin, crypto, whatever. You can make money, you can make millions, you can invest. And I don't know, I want to shake someone's hand and not trust a floating head on a green screen. And so this stuff is really important because right now is the moment when blockchain tech is really about to be adopted on a mass scale. We're starting to really feel, news outlets are talking about it. But if it's not properly adopted, if it's so word of mouth online, if it's not personal, person-to-person relationships, most likely all of us here only know a couple people using Steemit, right? It's not like our family and friends are on there. So you're constantly having to talk to people and prove that it exists. You can actually make money. You can actually get your content monetized. You can actually empower your business. And the meetup stuff is super cool because it's everywhere. It's all the time. I feel like Steemit is just an excuse for people to get together at this point. But this is a lot of stuff that I'm super excited. I'm going to Korea in a week, so I want to be part of the meetup scene, finally, for the first time. And so Clayup asked me also to, I guess, talk about the future roadmap of KR. Obviously, growth is a big one, continuing this kind of progress. Everything's still in flux. We're still trying to figure it out. So if anyone here has advice on how to do community growth or different kind of tactics and strategies they used on Steemit, we're super open. And another thing is, well, I guess two things. One is I'm focusing obviously on KR and Korean society, but I think this, hopefully this talk also brings a couple of sensibilities of how to grow other national or regional-based communities. Also interest-based communities on Steemit, whether you're a hashtag leader or something like that, or you want to cultivate a certain kind of hashtag in your field, whatever that might be. I think we can all start talking about this because, again, I think the personal approach, building communities from the ground up, requires a lot of work that probably not all of those tactics are going to be baked into the Steemit Inc. Or Steemit.com interface. So we have to do a lot of work on the ground because we are the best salespeople. We're probably better than Steemit Inc. right now, but we're the best people to go around and say, this is Steemit, this is what I did, this is what we can do together, and I want to welcome you onto it. I think I really want to see a lot more community growth. This is what we do in Sandbox as well. And a lot more experimentation is going to occur going forward. We have these two phrases in Korean, wigi and kiwe. Wigi means like risk or crisis. Kiwe means opportunity, and it uses the same key character. And so for us, and me personally, like it doesn't matter what the price of Steem is. It doesn't matter if the interface has a DDoS attack and it's a little slow or buggy. Those things will be fixed and figured out. But it's always important to kind of, even when things seem low or whatever, slow, low, not as in the best situation, it's always an opportunity. Because for me, again, it goes back to the technology in itself, in theory, is already disrupting societal structures, organizations, companies, et cetera. So again, like it's super volatile roller coaster that we've all gotten on together. And hopefully we're all going to get off, okay and stronger than before. And so that's the end of the talk. Thank you guys all for listening. I'm happy to take questions. Oh, 1 or 2 questions. Sorry.
Yes, let me get the microphone up and running. Okay, guys, we got time for 1 or 2 questions. And GZA, Giza, here you go.
Just a small question about, have you seen any development, a push from the Korean community? Like you mentioned, there's a dog bot. Do you see any more like actual, more structured companies or startup companies that want to build on top of Steemit?
I haven't seen companies yet. I don't think that's something we've gotten to the point, but a lot more apps and services on the platform. Yes, more and more developers. I just kind of give a broad overview, but members like Morning and Chung's on there are making equivalent services that are kind of broader for Steemit, but more for the Korean community now. I would love to see more companies. I would love to see, the orphanage donations turn into a nonprofit that people can donate to with all crypto or fiat money, whatever. That's something that I really want to push when I go to Korea there. But there's so much opportunity. I think a lot of this stuff is already kind of company structured, and the way they're mobilizing groups, taking on roles and responsibilities, I think they're already kind of getting in that direction and trajectory. I would love to see that build out more.
Any more questions? No? It's great. I love the banner. I'm gonna use. Oh yes.
Please take a photo with.
Shall we do the clapping with the microphone? Let's try it. No, longer. Okay, give it a hand for Michael Lee.
Thank you guys.
You can see Michael Lee tomorrow. Tomorrow, Michael Lee will present another time in the tomorrow's venue together with Voronoi about Steam Park.
Yeah, so some of you might have seen this is going to be a plug for our next talk tomorrow.
Right.
But Voronoi and I did the Hidrion account and the Sandbox account, and now we're doing creative projects with Steam, physical projects all around the world. So please join us for that talk tomorrow.